The stars in the outer rim were never as distant as they seemed. To those who had lived most of their lives in the dense, neon-lit cities of the core worlds, the vast, uncharted darkness beyond was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Dr. Elena Voss had always been drawn to the unknown, but even she couldn't ignore the thrill and uncertainty that came with venturing into the deep emptiness of the galaxy. The Horizon, a sleek research vessel outfitted for deep space exploration, cut through the blackness as it approached its destination. A nameless planet in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, so far from civilization that it was barely a dot on most star maps. According to ancient records found in a forgotten database, there was something remarkable hidden there, something that had eluded scientists and explorers for centuries. But Dr. Voss was the one who would uncover its secrets. She paced restlessly in the ship's command center, her sharp eyes scanning the holographic map projected before her. The surface of the planet, catalogued only as J-15, appeared uninhabited, its atmosphere barely breathable. Yet hidden beneath its barren surface was something of immense interest. A starship, ancient, yet untouched, lost in the folds of time. For years it had been a curiosity. Some said it was a relic of a long-lost civilization. Others believed it was a prototype weapon, a forgotten terror of some galaxy-spanning empire. But Dr. Voss wasn't concerned with the rumors. She was here for answers. Approaching planetary orbit in 10 minutes, Doctor. Lieutenant Marcos's voice came through her earpiece, interrupting her thoughts. His tone was steady, but she could sense the excitement in his words. "Thank you, Lieutenant." "Prepare the landing gear," she replied, tapping her console as she brought up the landing trajectory. She looked out of the large viewing window of the command deck and saw the planet growing larger, the gray and rocky surface beginning to take form. For a moment, it looked almost peaceful, if only because nothing moved on its surface. With a few swift commands, the ship began its descent toward the planet's surface. The team had only a limited amount of time to complete their investigation before supplies ran low, and the Horizon had to leave orbit. They were about to uncover something that could change everything, but Dr. Voss knew better than anyone. Discoveries this big often came with unforeseen consequences. The ship shuddered slightly as it entered the atmosphere, and Dr. Voss felt the familiar tension in the air. Outside, the thick atmosphere of J-15 pressed against the ship's hull, but inside, her heart beat with a mixture of anticipation and caution. She glanced at the rest of the crew, each of them silently awaiting their orders. All were present, awaiting. "I'll be in the lab preparing the scans," Dr. Voss said, her voice low but firm. "Marcos, you have command of the landing crew. You know what to do." "Understood, Doctor," Marcos said. The ship's engines roared as it broke through the upper clouds of J-15, the barren surface of the planet finally visible below. Dr. Voss couldn't help but feel the weight of history in the moment. Whatever was buried beneath that rock was something beyond their understanding. The landing was smooth, though a gentle tremor vibrated through the ship as it touched down on the rocky plain. The ship's engines powered down, and the atmosphere inside the Horizon felt suddenly too quiet, too still. "Let's get to work," Dr. Voss muttered, turning toward the hatch. The exploration team, consisting of Dr. Voss, Marcos, and a few other specialists, descended to the surface with all the necessary gear. They wore atmospheric suits that would allow them to survive on the planet's thin air, though the sun's pale light did little to illuminate the landscape around them. The horizon stretched endlessly in all directions, a vast gray wasteland dotted with jagged rock formations. The iceberg in front of them pointed palely. It was a place where time seemed to stand still. Ahead, the ship's sensors had detected a large metallic object buried beneath the ground, hidden from sight by layers of dirt and rock. The ship was close, very close. All of the drag ships and private pilots watched the whole scene with calm attention. knowing that part of the enemy was still left. "You can't miss it," Dr. Voss said, as she led the team toward a small outcrop of rock. "The readings indicate it's about 20 meters beneath the surface." The team worked together, using specialized tools to excavate the area. It was slow and laborious work, but after what seemed like hours, the first piece of metal was uncovered. It gleamed against the dull backdrop of the planet's surface, a streak of silver, far too perfect to be natural. Dr. Voss knelt beside it, brushing off the dirt and taking in the sight before her. The metal seemed otherworldly, the surface unmarred by the passage of time, as if it had been preserved for eons. "We're close," Dr. Voss said, her voice tight with excitement. She directed the crew to continue their work, carefully excavating the area. Within the next hour, the team had uncovered a massive ship, its hull towering over them. It was unlike anything any of them had ever seen. The ship's design was sleek, futuristic, and almost organic in its curvature. The alloy used to construct the vessel shimmered faintly, as though it was alive. Its structure seemed to hum, just faintly, as if it were waiting. Dr. Voss stood frozen for a moment, her mouth dry. It was beautiful. Too beautiful to be real. Almost. But it was real. And it was here. Dark magic pervaded her. "This is it," she whispered. "The Starship. It's perfect," said Weinstein. She walked slowly toward the entrance of the ship, her boots crunching on the rocky surface. There were no visible signs of damage, no indication that the ship had ever been used, much less abandoned. It was pristine, untouched by time. "I need a scan of the ship's interior," Dr. Voss ordered. "Marcos, prepare the entry." Marcos, always cautious, turned to her with a concerned expression. "Doctor, we don't know what's inside. We don't know who or what used to be here." "I know," she said, "but we have to know what this is." The team worked quickly to breach the outer hull, and after several hours of effort, they succeeded in opening the ship's main entry hatch. It slid open with a hiss, revealing the interior. Dr. Voss couldn't help but let out a soft gasp. The inside of the ship was just as flawless as its exterior. The walls were lined with strange symbols and intricate patterns, almost like a language. The room beyond the hatch was empty, save for a central structure that rose from the floor, a massive control console surrounded by several chairs, all facing toward a large viewport. But it was the centerpiece of the room that caught Dr. Voss's attention. A single pilot's chair suspended in the center of the room, bathed in a faint, ethereal glow. "Is that the control center?" one of the specialists asked, his voice barely a whisper. Dr. Voss nodded, but her eyes were locked on the chair. There was something about it that seemed wrong. It was too deliberate, too important. It was as if the chair itself was waiting for someone to sit in it. "I need to sit in that chair," Dr. Voss said, her voice low but resolute. The others exchanged uneasy glances. "Doctor, are you sure?" Marcos asked. "We have no idea what this ship is. It could be dangerous." "I know," Dr. Voss said, her eyes never leaving the chair. "But I think it's the only way we're going to learn anything." "Ah!" She took a step forward and approached the chair. The air seemed to grow still around her, and with each step the hum of the ship grew louder, almost imperceptibly. The chair's surface shimmered as though responding to her presence, and a strange sensation crept over her, like a soft pulse running through her body. "Doctor?" Marcos called out, his voice tense. Dr. Voss turned back to look at him, her eyes filled with determination. "I have to do this." He turned toward her, and their eyes met. With a deep breath, she lowered herself into the chair. As soon as she did, the ship responded. She closed her eyes and saw the ship responded. The lights flickered, and the walls around her seemed to vibrate, a deep hum filling the air. The console before her came to life, glowing with data she could not comprehend. The ship's systems whirred and clicked, activating with an ease that was both terrifying and exhilarating. "What's happening?" one of the crew members asked, his voice a mix of awe and fear. Dr. Voss reached forward, her fingers brushing against the controls. The ship seemed to respond to her touch, as if it had been waiting for her, as if it recognized her presence. The entire vessel shifted, and for the first time in centuries, it began to wake. But Dr. Voss knew that this was only the beginning. The ship was alive. It had been dormant for too long, and now it had chosen her to guide it. The question was no longer whether they would understand the ship's secrets. It was how they would survive the journey it would take them on. They were on the bounce back and were ready for battle if necessary. As she gripped the controls, the ship's engines hummed to life, and the stars outside the viewport began to move, as though the galaxy itself was shifting. Her heart picked up its pace, and she skidded across the rough surface of the galaxy. It was time to fly. Dr. Elena Voss had always been fascinated by the unknown. From her earliest days as a scientist, she had been driven by the relentless pursuit of discovery. But never in her wildest dreams had she imagined uncovering something as monumental as the ship that now lay before her on the barren surface of planet J-15. It had taken years of meticulous research, countless failed missions, and the expertise of an exceptional crew. But they had done it. They had found the Starship that had eluded the galaxy for centuries. It wasn't just the ship's immaculate condition that left Dr. Voss in awe. It was the feeling that surrounded it. Something almost alive, an energy that hummed softly within the very walls of the vessel. The ship had been buried beneath layers of rock, hidden from the universe for reasons no one could explain. Now, its secrets waited to be uncovered. The team worked tirelessly, setting up scanners and equipment to map the interior of the ship. Dr. Voss could feel the anticipation building as the minutes ticked by. The rest of the crew looked just as eager, but there was something in the air, something electric. They were standing on the threshold of a discovery that could change everything. Yet, as they gathered their tools, Dr. Voss found herself inexplicably drawn to the ship's entrance. She had to be the first to enter. Something deep within her told her that the discovery would only truly begin once she crossed that threshold. G.F. Patton. Marcos, always the cautious one, stood a few paces behind her, surveying the surroundings. "You sure about this, Doctor?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. "We don't know what's inside. The ship could have been here for millennia. It might not be safe." "I know, Lieutenant," Dr. Voss replied, her gaze fixed on the ship. She could feel the pull of its mystery, an overwhelming sense of inevitability. "But we can't wait any longer. The answers are inside, and we need to find them." Marcos hesitated but nodded. "I'll keep an eye on the perimeter. Just be careful." With a final glance at the crew, Dr. Voss stepped forward, her boots crunching softly against the rocky surface as she made her way to the ship's entrance. It had been carefully excavated by the team, and now a massive metallic door stood before her. Unlike the smooth, featureless exterior, this door was covered in symbols and intricate markings. It seemed almost like a language, though one Dr. Voss had never seen before. The door wasn't locked, and as she approached, it began to hum softly. Dr. Voss placed her hand on the cool surface of the door. The moment her fingers made contact, the hum intensified, vibrating through her hand and up her arm. She froze, eyes wide. It felt alive. The ship was responding to her, welcoming her inside. It was creating her own electric problem. With a soft hiss, the door slid open, revealing the interior of the ship. Dr. Voss stepped inside and the air shifted, becoming cooler, more metallic. Her breath echoed in the silence as she took in the vast chamber before her. The walls were made of the same shimmering metal that the ship's exterior had been crafted from. But here, the surface was engraved with intricate patterns, almost like a map or a star chart. Strange luminous symbols pulsed softly across the walls, as though they were alive. The air smelled faintly of something ancient, like dust and forgotten history. Yet there was also an undertone of something new, something waiting to be discovered. Dr. Voss's heart raced as she stepped further into the room. Her boots clicked against the floor, the sound amplified by the vast emptiness of the chamber. As she moved toward the center, she saw it. A large circular platform that seemed to be the heart of the ship. It was a control center of sorts, with a series of consoles, glowing screens, and sleek panels arranged in a way that seemed to anticipate her every move. But what caught her attention the most was the chair. The chair was situated at the center of the room, facing a large viewport that looked out into the void of space. It was sleek and futuristic, almost like a throne in its design, but more functional than ornamental. The chair was surrounded by a network of controls, each with glowing symbols that pulsed as if alive. The entire room seemed to gravitate around it, as though the chair itself was beckoning her. She approached cautiously, feeling the weight of the moment. Something about the chair felt significant, as if it was waiting for her, waiting for the right person to sit in it and unlock its secrets. The rest of the room felt dormant, as though it had been in stasis for centuries, awaiting the touch of someone who could bring it to life. "Doctor, you okay?" Marcos's voice came through her earpiece, snapping her out of her reverie. "You've been standing there for a while. Is everything all right?" Dr. Voss didn't respond immediately. She was too absorbed in the ship, in the overwhelming feeling that this was her destiny, that the chair was meant for her. But even as she stood there, her scientific mind kicked in. She had to be rational. She had to be cautious. "I'm fine, Lieutenant," she said, her voice calm. I just need a moment." Her fingers hovered over the armrest of the chair. It was cold to the touch, but it seemed to hum in response to her presence. Dr. Voss hesitated. Was it possible that this chair was more than just a piece of technology? Could it be some sort of interface, a living control center that could only be activated by the right person? She couldn't resist. With a deep breath, she lowered herself into the chair. As soon as she did, the ship seemed to come alive. The air around her vibrated, and the humming sound that had been faint before intensified, filling the chamber. The panels on the walls lit up with streams of data, and the control consoles flickered to life, displaying complex alien text and symbols that she couldn't even begin to decipher. Dr. Voss's heart raced as her fingers instinctively reached toward the controls. As if responding to her movements, the ship's systems hummed, and the glowing symbols on the panels changed in a fluid, graceful motion. It was as if the ship were speaking to her, guiding her hands to the right spots. "Doctor," Marcos's voice came again, but this time it was laced with worry. "What's happening? We're picking up some kind of energy spike from your location. Are you okay?" She could barely process his words as her fingers brushed over the control panel. The ship's systems responded, and suddenly the viewport before her filled with images. Stars, galaxies, and strange cosmic phenomena, each one more breathtaking than the last. It was a gateway to the farthest reaches of the universe. Her astrophysicist, Fred Flander Yappan, told her, "Everything happens for reason." Dr. Voss felt a deep connection to the ship, an undeniable sense that she was meant to be here, in this moment. The ship seemed to understand her, almost as if it had been waiting for her all along. It was no longer just an ancient relic. It was something alive, something that responded to her presence. It was as if the ship itself had chosen her to be its pilot, to guide it through the stars. It was abandoned world accepted by society, had been traveling the physical galaxy for thousands of years. "Elena, talk to me," Marcos urged, his voice growing more frantic. "We're getting strange readings. We can't access the ship's systems from here. What's happening?" Dr. Voss didn't respond. Her fingers moved of their own accord, pushing buttons and sliding levers that activated the ship's systems. The vessel's engines roared to life, filling the chamber with a low, deep hum. The viewport before her flickered, and for the first time she saw it. An intricate star map, the very same one she had seen in the symbols on the walls. It was a map of the galaxy. But it wasn't just any map. It was a map of places that were unknown, places that had never been charted by any ship. The ship had access to star systems that were hidden from every known database, regions of space that no one had ever ventured into. The realization hit her with full force. The ship was ancient, yes, but it wasn't just a relic. It was a key to a galaxy that had been forgotten, a key to unlocking mysteries that no one had even dared to imagine. The ship was meant to be a guide, a vessel that could traverse the unknown, and she was the one who had been chosen to unlock its secrets. Her heart pounded in her chest. The gravity of the situation was overwhelming. The crew was still outside, waiting, but she was no longer just a scientist. She was the pilot of something far beyond their comprehension. The stars outside the viewport began to shift, as though the ship was preparing to leave. She had to act fast. They had to leave before the unknown forces of the galaxy came to claim them. Marcos's voice crackled in her earpiece, but it was too late. The ship was already in motion, her scanner focusing. "Hold on," she whispered, her hands steady on the controls. "We're about to discover a whole new universe." The ship lifted off the ground effortlessly, soaring into the sky, leaving J-15 behind. Dr. Voss didn't know what awaited them. All she knew was that the adventure had only just begun. The discovery had only just begun. The stars outside the viewport were unlike anything Dr. Elena Voss had ever seen. Their light pulsed with an eerie, almost rhythmic pattern, as if they were part of some grand cosmic symphony. The ship, now fully alive, glided effortlessly through the void of space, its systems humming in perfect harmony with its surroundings. For a moment, Dr. Voss forgot about the crew, about the mission, about everything. She was weightless, suspended in a realm of pure discovery, her hands gently guiding the controls as the vessel responded to her touch with an almost sentient awareness. It wasn't just the ship that had awakened. It was her, too. "Doctor, please respond." Marcos's voice crackled through her earpiece, dragging her back to the present. His tone was no longer just filled with worry. It was laced with urgency. "What's going on? We saw the ship power up from the outside. We need you to answer, now." Elena blinked, shaking her head to clear the overwhelming sense of awe that had taken over her mind. The ship's systems were operating on their own accord, but she could still feel the thread that connected her to it. She couldn't explain it, this indescribable sense of being a part of something greater, something much more vast and ancient than anything she had ever imagined, like Ottiv's. "I'm here, Marcos," she said, her voice steady but tinged with wonder. She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the control panel, which had now shifted into an entirely new interface. The symbols that had glowed before were now part of a complex star map, expanding before her like an intricate web of knowledge. I'm fine, Lieutenant. The ship is alive, Marcos. It's responding to me." "Responding to you? What do you mean, responding to you?" Marcos's voice was thick with disbelief, but she could hear the fear beginning to creep in. We need you to get back to the hatch, now. We don't know what's happening up there, but it doesn't feel right." Dr. Voss hesitated for a brief moment. Marcos's words felt distant, like they belonged to a different reality altogether. She looked down at the control panel again, and the map expanded further, revealing distant star systems she had never seen in any galactic chart. There were coordinates, vast distances, and paths that seemed to lead to places that had been marked unreachable by every major spacefaring civilization. But here, in the quiet hum of the ship's chambers, those unreachable stars were now within grasp. Touch and smell. Finding these was like clicking gold. The feeling was intoxicating. "I can't leave just yet," she replied, her voice low and steady. "You have no idea what this is. The ship. It's not just a vessel. It's something more, something far beyond what we've ever encountered. And it's communicating with me." "Communicating? Elena, this isn't safe. We don't know what this ship is or where it's taking you," Marcos urged, his voice cracking with the tension of the moment. "We need to get out of here and get back to the horizon. Now." Elena felt a pang of guilt. She knew that the crew had no way of understanding what she was experiencing, what she was feeling, but she also knew that the opportunity before her was too significant to ignore. They could leave, yes. They could go back to the safety of the horizon and report their findings. But would they ever truly understand what this ship could offer? Would they ever be able to uncover its secrets without the one person who had been chosen to guide it? A part of her already knew the answer. "I'm sorry, Marcos, I can't leave yet, not without understanding what this ship wants." Marcos was silent for a moment. Elena could practically feel the conflict radiating through the comms. He had always respected her as a scientist, but he also cared for her safety. She knew he was torn, but she wouldn't, back down now. Hightower said, "Understood," he said finally, his voice strained. "Just be careful, Doctor. We'll be monitoring you from here. Don't do anything reckless." "I'll be fine," Elena assured him, though she knew that wasn't entirely true. There was no way to predict what would happen next. The ship had already shown signs of sentience. How far would it go? What did it truly want from her? As she watched the stars streak past, the ship began to shift again. The hum beneath her feet grew louder, more insistent. A series of holographic panels flared to life around her, displaying data that only grew more and more complex. Words she didn't recognize scrawled by at an impossible speed, and yet, somehow, they made sense to her. It was as if the ship was teaching her how to read its language, how to decode its message. The symbols weren't just an interface. They were a story of an ancient civilization, a race that had mastered the stars and had, for reasons unknown, left behind this ship as their final testament. Once upon a time, suddenly one of the symbols caught her eye. It was a glyph she hadn't seen before, pulsating with a soft blue glow. As her fingers hovered over it, the symbol expanded into a map of sorts. A series of pathways, each one marked with coordinates that led across the galaxy. But there was one path, clearly marked in bright red, that led out of known space, into an area that was completely uncharted. The path seemed to spiral outward, like a road to nowhere. But that wasn't what struck her. What struck her was that the map didn't just show stars and galaxies. It showed something more. It showed a destination, a place that even the ancients had never reached, a place that could hold the answers to questions no one had dared to ask. "This is impossible," Elena whispered under her breath, her mind racing. The path was marked, the destination clear, but there were no records of it anywhere. There were no ancient texts, no database entries, no rumors from the farthest corners of the galaxy that spoke of this place. It was as though it had been erased from existence, lost to time, as if someone or something had deliberately hidden it away. Her hand trembled as she reached for the control panel, unable to resist the pull of the unknown. With a deep breath, she activated the pathway, sending the ship hurtling toward the red-marked coordinates. The ship responded instantly, the hum of the engines intensifying as it began to change course, its systems locking onto the new trajectory with perfect precision. "Doctor, stop!" Marco shouted, his voice sharp with panic. "You're heading into uncharted space. We don't know what's out there." Marco stared at him, unmoved. But it was too late. The ship had already made its decision. It was as if it had chosen its course, and Elena, its pilot, its guide, was simply along for the ride. The ship's motion was smooth, almost fluid, as it cut through the vast emptiness of space. There were no stars here, no familiar celestial markers, just an endless sea of black, stretching on into infinity. Elena sat in the chair, her hands gripping the controls, but it was no longer necessary. The ship seemed to know where it was going. It had taken on a life of its own, as though it was driven by something far more powerful than its mechanical systems. As the hours passed, Elena's thoughts drifted. What had she just done? Was she being reckless? Or was this exactly what she was meant to do? Her heart raced with excitement, but there was an undercurrent of fear that she couldn't shake. The unknown was vast, and for the first time in her life, she was truly out of her depth. The stars outside the viewport began to blur, and Elena noticed something strange. The fabric of space itself seemed to warp, bending and stretching in ways that defied logic. It was as if they were passing through some kind of field, something that disrupted the laws of physics, a place where time and space became fluid. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the distortion stopped. The ship came to a gradual halt, and before her, a new sight emerged. A massive structure, unlike anything she had ever seen before, loomed ahead. It was a city. No, not just a city, but an entire sprawling civilization built into the heart of an asteroid field. The buildings were towering spires of metal and crystal, some of them reaching high above the surface, their outlines glowing faintly. They were ancient, but pristine, untouched by the ravages of time. But there was more. The structures were connected by vast energy bridges, strands of light that arced across the darkness of space like living threads. The city pulsed with energy, a beacon in the void. "Where are we?" Elena whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship. Her heart raced as she realized what they had stumbled upon. A forgotten city, a long-lost civilization hidden away in the depths of space, waiting to be discovered. The ship had brought her here, to the heart of an ancient mystery, and now she was on the brink of uncovering the secrets of this place, secrets that could change the course of galactic history forever. Marcos's voice came through the comms again, but Elena didn't hear it. She was no longer just a scientist. She was the first to discover a civilization that had been lost for eons. And with that discovery came a new responsibility, one that would change everything. The journey had only just begun.